They then both took it in turns to clap Richard's cheeks. Richard, a former disgraced London banker, was jailed for 5 years. Richard lost everything, including his wife. After he was jailed, she filed for divorce and took everything. She transferred all the money in their shared bank account into hers, sold their home and kept the money for herself. Richard was heartbroken because when he met her she had nothing and he had it all. Richard was now a broken man in prison. After the first couple of weeks in prison, Richard had many failed attempts at having his booty taken in the showers by a few guys, but luckily Richard managed to escape unharmed. Richard had his own cell by himself, so he didn't have to worry about getting his cheeks clapped while he was sleeping, until one day the guards came to his cell and said, "Richard, we are moving you into another cell because we need this cell for a new guy." Richard pleaded with the guards not to be moved into a shared cell because other inmates were already trying to clap his cheeks, and doing this would seal his fate. The guards, with their stone-cold faces, didn't care and pretty much said, "Richard, we are moving you whether you like it or not, plus we need people like you in prison." The more guys getting their booty cheeks clapped, the less fighting on the wing, which makes our job so much easier, so we love when guys get their cheeks blown out. Now if you don't move into your new cell, we will throw you in your new cell. Angry and upset, Richard packed his belongings and walked with the guards into his new cell. The cell was empty but had a bunk bed and a single bed which equaled to 3 beds inside, but the 2 other guys were gone, so Richard was safe for now. 5 minutes later the guards opened the door and 2 guys walked into the cell. Once Richard saw who the guys were, he looked like he had seen a ghost, because it was 2 of the guys who had been trying to clap his cheeks for weeks. Richard tried to run out of the cell, but the guard quickly closed the door and said, "No way, you ain't going nowhere. Enjoy your workout, Richard." The guard laughed as he walked off. Richard turned around and both men were staring at him. Both men were black and 6 foot tall and ripped, while Richard was only 5'7". They were both looking at him like how a lion looks at a reindeer just before eating it. One of the guys said, "Richard, you might as well just give it up now because you can't escape us." Richard pleaded with the guys to not take his booty. Richard said he will do anything to not be turned out in prison. He even offered to clean their shoes, do their washing, but both guys looked at each other and started to laugh as they told Richard, "You are going to do that anyways, so you are not doing us a favor by offering. You are the new cell woman. You will do everything we say or else." Richard was so scared because all he knew was the corporate world. He had never actually been in a fight before. Richard went to private school and had a soft, easy life. The only time he saw violence was in movies. One of the guys told Richard to take his clothes off and bend over. They said, "Let's just get this part out of the way now." Richard got on his knees to beg both of them not to do this. They both looked at each other and laughed. That's when one of the guys slapped Richard. The slap was so painful that Richard fell to the ground. Richard's face went bright red with a red handprint of the slap clearly showing on Richard's face. The guys ripped off Richard's clothes and bent him over on the bottom bunk bed. One of the guys got a dirty sock on the floor and put it in Richard's mouth to mute his screams. They then both took it in turns to clap Richard's cheeks. After they were finished, they threw Richard on the floor and got back on their beds and started playing computer games together. Richard laid there in the middle of the cell, defeated and humiliated. Booty taken and booty blown out. Guys in other cells knew what was going on because they could hear the bed moving. A few guys shouted through their cells, "I'll give you 4 packs of noodles for the woman," and another shouted, "I'll give you 5 packs of noodles and a tuna for the girl," while they laughed. The 2 guys shouted back and said, "She's not for sale. She belongs to us now." The cell door now opened and the guard saw Richard on the floor, clothes ripped off with white sticky stuff leaking from his booty. The guard laughed and said, "You boys had some fun. It's time for dinner." Richard's cellmates both walked out and went to dinner. Both men had the biggest smiles on their faces as they walked to the canteen. Traumatized and still on the floor, Richard was a broken man. Another prisoner walking past saw Richard on the floor. Before he walked in the cell, the other prisoner looked left and right and saw the coast was clear, so he walked into the cell. He picked Richard up and asked what had happened. Richard told him his 2 cellmates just clapped his cheeks. The other prisoner then asked Richard if he could also clap Richard's cheeks too, because the other guys did. Richard was so shocked the guy asked him. Richard said to the guy, "I actually thought you came to help me." The prisoner said to Richard, "Help you? Are you crazy? This is prison. I only came in the cell to clap your cheeks too. The other guys clapped your cheeks, so that means I can clap your cheeks too, and I'm super roasting, so give it up to me now." This prisoner was also black and 6 foot tall, but Richard said, "No, I'm not the Wings Booty Pleasure Entertainment." So Richard tried to walk out the cell, but the other prisoner grabbed Richard and put him in a headlock and dragged him onto the floor, where he clapped Richard's cheeks. Some time went by and the door opened. It was Richard's 2 cellmates. They both grabbed the other inmate off Richard and said, "What the hell are you doing? This girl belongs to us." The prisoner told them he didn't know Richard belonged to them. He told the guys he just saw Richard on the floor and he just couldn't resist, and if he had known Richard was their woman he wouldn't have busted Richard's cheeks. He offered both guys 5 packs of noodles and 2 packs of tuna as a way of saying sorry. The guys accepted and let him go to get the goods. He came back with the goods and the 2 guys were pleased, so all was resolved and there were no hard feelings. Both guys now angry and shouting at Richard for not fighting back and just letting the other guy come in the cell and bust his cheeks. Richard then told the guys, "What can I do? I'm not a fighter or a street guy like you two. I come from the financial world, so I froze when you lot took my cheeks. All 3 of you were just too strong for me to fight off. I always said if someone tried to take my cheeks I would fight them off, but when it happens in real life it's a different story, so I froze." The 2 guys said to Richard, "As punishment we are going to clap your cheeks again." While the 2 guys were taking it in turns to clap Richard's cheeks, Richard thought to himself, "What am I doing here? I shouldn't be here. I lost my job and my wife all for something stupid, and now I'm in prison getting my cheeks clapped by 2 black men. If only I could just turn back the hands of time, because I wish I was never in prison."